this evening we have East Coast USA. Tonight we have a really appetizing night for you. I'm sure a lot of people have done bits and pieces of the East Coast, which are like the Washington DC, the Boston, the New York, which you're going to see an awful lot more this evening outside the usual hotspots. So I'm really looking forward to showing you all those and introducing to all our wonderful attendees this evening. Little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure a lot of you have been with us before. If you're with us for the first night, you'll see that there's a Q&A box and a chat box. So you can pop in your questions there throughout the evening. You can put your notes into the chat box. We'd love to hear any feedback you have. If you've been somewhere, if you liked something, if you'd recommend anything, if you have any thoughts or if you have any questions. You know, loads of interaction is really good for us. And that's what we found over the last 5 nights, that the more interaction, the better, the more fun it is for us as well. So, and we're here to answer all your questions. So even if it's not about the destinations here this evening, if it's a general USA question, we'll certainly help you answer as best we can. Now, okay, so just a quick overview of Platinum Travel and our history with the USA. So we have been specializing in the USA since 2005. Literally since we opened the business, it's been a niche of ours. So we absolutely love it and we're very passionate about it. We have very strong relationships with USA tourism bodies and we're closely associated with the Visit USA Committee in Ireland. And this evening we actually have Tony Lane, who has 2 caps on him. He has his Discover New England cap, but he's also the executive director of Visit USA. So so don't ask him any too hard questions that are too hard, but God bless him, he's answered a lot of questions in the last year about the USA, or the last number of years, Tony. So we've worked with them for a very long time, and through that we work very closely with the USA across the whole of the 50 states, and we love niche, bespoke, tailor-made holiday. That's what we're about. So we listen to what you want. If it's a family, a couple, singles, honeymoon, you know, we can put it together, and we have all the partners in the USA to look after you. We're constantly training in the office and in destination, attending conferences and getting new product up on the site for you. Everything at the moment is in the office, but we hope to be back in the USA soon, and we'll have a little bit of update on how the US is doing in a while too. And finally, as always, as important as ever, we're licensed and bonded by the Commission for Aviation Regulation in Ireland. We'd always encourage you to ensure that you book with a licensed and bonded travel agency or tour operator. We're a small industry. There's only about 3,000 of us. Ideally, we'd love every booking to come to us, but really any booking for the travel industry is support for the travel industry, and just go to your local agent or come to us and make sure that you are protected wherever you book your holiday. So that's enough about us. I'm going to keep moving on. Nobody wants to hear us talk too much about Platinum Travel. But what we want to do is talk about Platinum Travel and why we think you should choose the USA. The thing about the US that a lot of people don't realize is that there's so much more than the stereotypical destination. So we constantly have people thinking, oh, I don't want to go to the States. And why don't they want to go? Oh, I don't like New York, or I don't want to go to theme parks. There's so much more outside the box. And that's the purpose of these evenings, these 4 evenings on USA Week, is to show you that and to give you a bit of inspiration, something else you might like to do. It's always good value for money, even when the dollar is bad, because the cost of living in some of these places is phenomenal. So once you're not staying, obviously, you know, right on the heart of New York or in the middle of Los Angeles, you know, there's great value to be had throughout each of the states that are represented here this evening, and even the states that we're showing on the other nights. So that's a really good point. No matter what type of holiday you're doing, you can get good value. The pre-clearance from Dublin, for those of you that have done it or haven't done it, you know that clearing customs and immigration in Dublin makes life so easy when you get to the States. There's a huge array of direct flights in a normal year from Dublin. And there's a wide selection of East Coast, West Coast, and into Chicago in the middle as well. And the people that are here this evening, there's direct flights to all their destinations. So it's as easy as going to Europe. It really is. Every type of holiday you could need, families, couples, singles. You can do a fly drive, a motorhome trip, an escorted tour. If you want to just do a twin center, if you want a city and a beach, there's ample choice, and we can help you get that holiday you need. And finally, and Tony, I'm sure will maybe talk about this in a while, that Ireland is regularly rated in the top 20 countries to the USA, and over 500,000 visit there in 2019 and 2018. Like, we punch well above our weight, and they love us over there. So you come with an Irish accent, and nothing to the few British accents you'll hear this evening. We love them the same as well. But they do love the Irish because of the history there. So this is who we have. I am very kindly joining us tonight, and I thank them all for giving up their time to join us. You'll see on the map the states that we're covering over the right hand side. I actually, anybody who was here last night saw that I managed to put the states in the actual boxes on the map here. I couldn't fit these in this evening, so you'll have to excuse me for the general way I did it on the right hand side. Most of the guys tonight will show you in more detail maps of their own areas, but you can see we're working down that east coast on the right hand side and covering quite a number of states. And then on Thursday evening, we'll go further down into southern USA, which will continue down to the Carolinas, Georgia, down to the deep south and across to Arkansas. But tonight it's that top right hand eastern corner that we're going to be focusing on. So I'll introduce you to who we have this evening, and I give you all a wave. We have from Capital Region USA, we have the wonderful Della Tully. And Della's with us for a few evenings this week, so we'll welcome her with open arms. She's working very hard. We've Tony Lane from Discover New England, and we're really lucky that Tony has brought his counterpart, Chris, over from New England as well. I'm not sure if Chris is on the call yet, but he will certainly be joining us to answer any questions. So we have a real life American here, and he's a great guy, really great guy. And we have Julie Greenhill from Philadelphia. So she's from Visit Philly, and she will give you everything you need to know about Philly and the surrounding area. And then finally, we have last but not least, Will Hall from I Love New York, which covers not just Manhattan, but the stunning state of New York State, which I've been there, is absolutely beautiful. And I'm kind of precious about it because I think it gets forgotten because people think New York and think Manhattan. So he's going to show you an awful lot more of that tonight. And finally, then we have brilliant Paula Cross, who's been with us since day one with me here since last week, doing everything behind the scenes, questions, chat, the whole lot. So anything you have, fire it through. She's keeping an eye on everything. So just before we start, we're going to start with Capital Region, but I'm just going to unshare my screen for a minute and just pick on Tony for a quick sec, if he doesn't mind. I only asked him earlier if he wouldn't mind me putting him on the spot here. So Tony, just very, very quickly, you and I spoke earlier, and I mentioned to you that I was very pleasantly surprised about a conference I was at a couple of weeks ago about how the States is opening up. You're dealing with this all day, every day. Was I imagining things, or are they really, getting ahead?
Yeah, it's actually, in terms of their vaccination program, and obviously, conditions have to be right here and then in the States as well for normal travel to really get going again. But their vaccination program, it was a bit slow to get going, but it's really building up ahead of steam now at the moment. And I send out a bulletin every week to the Irish travel trades that details like the percentage of the population that have gotten at least one dose of a vaccine. And it's going up by like 3 and 4% every week. So at the moment, it's at, I think the last time I checked earlier today was 29%. Now some states will be above that and some states will be a little bit below. But when Joe Biden says that he's, that the target is to have everyone vaccinated by May, that is looking realistic, and I think when we all heard that kind of headline, we all did a bit of a double take. Can that actually happen? But once the mechanisms of production and everything get going in the States, things happen really quickly once they're in motion.
Yeah,
so it's really great to see. And we had a bit of a good rumor earlier on that came from the Biden administration about the US travel ban on people living in Europe. That's looking likely that it will be removed in mid-May. So as I said, there's a lot of things that have to go right. Obviously, our conditions here have to be right, and the conditions over there have to be right. But that's another step along the way for normal travel getting going again. So all very positive.
That's brilliant. And that's what I felt coming out of those meetings I had a few weeks ago. And I know pretty much everybody here on this call has been at US conferences over the last couple of weeks dealing with counterparts. We've all discussed it. And they really are flying ahead. Restaurants are opening, national parks. There's some restaurants are at 100%, and things are moving along and people are still being safe. So maybe these wide open spaces, even though we're tired of saying the word wide open spaces, actually is what people will look for this year. I know we didn't get great, like we didn't get brilliant news in our announcement today. For those guys that are with us from the UK, we had announcements today, but it's definitely moving and there is light. And I feel, listening to the USA, and Tony, you're probably the same, that our turn is coming. Our turn is coming. It is coming down the line. So just a matter of hanging in there. So maybe the others might, when you're doing a presentation, I'm sure you have it there, you might touch on how your states are doing, and we'll certainly ask Chris how things are in New England, maybe around Tony's call there. Grant. Okay, well, I will go straight on to Della. So Della, I'm going to we have you, I'm going to show a video for you first for Capital Region USA, and then we're going to go straight into your presentation. Just explain to everybody, Della is live with us here this evening, but she pre-recorded it because just for technology reasons. So she is here live. So you're going to see double up. But yeah, you can turn off your camera. So we'll all mute and thank you, Della, for joining us. And I will put you on now. Do your video, and then we'll put you on your presentation. Okay. Thanks everyone, and enjoy. Sorry, I think there was no sound there, so I'm just going to stop that for a second and start again. Sorry, everybody. I'll just give it a go. Apologies now for 2 seconds. This is always the glitch. Night 5, and I thought I was doing so well. 2 secs, everybody now. Just get out of that. And okay, so let's try this again. So, okay, Paula, you might let me know if we're good to go now. And share sound. There we go.
everyone. My name is Della and I work for the Capital Region USA. I'm going to take you on a little tour of our region, which, as you can see, consists of Washington, D.C., the capital, and then the two surrounding states of Maryland and Virginia. Platinum have a couple of itineraries which take in our region on their self-drive itineraries. One of them is called the Captivating Capital Region, so hopefully you will see why after this presentation. So where are we? That's the usual question. We're obviously up on the northeastern seaboard as far as the US is concerned. We're really well connected as far as DC between the three major cities in the region. So we are only, as it says, just over 100 miles from Philadelphia, so we often get combined with Philly, New York further up again, and then Boston, of course. Amtrak offers a really great rail service in our region. The fares are often very reasonable off-peak, so it's a great way of connecting. If you want to connect those cities with a capital region itinerary, it's pretty easy to do. So Washington, D.C., obviously I'm biased, but one of my favorite cities. This is a map showing our metro. Metro is the subway. And as you can see, you can pretty much get anywhere in the city using that. We have a lot of green spaces. Washington isn't like a Manhattan. If you haven't been there, I think a lot of people expect it to maybe be a little bit like a New York, but it's not. There's lots of greenery, lots of big wide open spaces, avenues, long wide sidewalks, so it's really easily accessible. You can also get around using segways, bikes, trolley tours. There's a DC circulator bus that does a figure of 8 around Washington, and the most of what you will want to see is actually in that green area you can see on the map, which I'll explain on the next slide. So 103 things to do in DC, and that's not a fib. We do actually have that. The National Mall area down here is a green grassy area. You'll have seen it many a time in movies and on the television, and it's where a lot of your tourist attractions are located. That's what makes DC so easy to tour around. This is an area of just over 2 miles long, and you'll see many of the Smithsonian museums here. There's obviously over a dozen Smithsonian museums like the Air and Space, the Natural History, and many more. They're mostly in this area, along with many other monuments, galleries, and museums. One of the key things about our monuments and museums is that they are free of charge in the Maine to get into. There's very few that actually charge any admission. So all the Smithsonians are free of charge, and you can just literally go from one to the next. They're, like I said, they're pretty much located together. For the most part anyway. This always reminds me to tell people to take a twilight tour if you can, or a sunset tour. As you can see, everything is lit up and it's absolutely beautiful at night. The two bottom slides show again just ways of getting around DC. As you can see, it's nice and flat in the areas that you will normally be traveling around. So therefore just made for getting out on bikes and out in the open. Ferries, bikes, segs, pretty much anything you can think of. Just obviously another slide that tells you about the museums in DC. The one on the left is the new African American Museum, really, really popular. And obviously, again, you can spend all day there, or you can spend 2 hours. If you're not having to pay for admission, it makes it really easy just to choose what you want to do and for how long. We're made up of loads of neighborhoods, as most US cities are. The slide on the left shows Georgetown, home to Georgetown University. You have lots of boutique and high-end shopping there. On the right-hand side, U Street, Ben's Chili Bowl, their claim to fame is that Barack Obama visits and eats there. And yes, you can sit in the chair. It has a special label on it. So obviously a good photo opportunity there. Adams Morgan, really good for nightlife and every kind of food you can imagine. If you're anything like me, food takes up quite a lot of your holiday, or actually daily life. And you know, whatever you want to eat, you will find in Washington, every kind of ethnic restaurant. So a fly drive tour of the capital region. One of the most important things I always think to share with people, I've done this on my own holidays and also taking trips with travel agents, is that this is quite a compact area. And as you'll see from this map, you get the coast, you get the Washington DC capital sites, and then you also get Virginia, which you've got the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Shenandoah National Park. So in an area that you can very easily tour between 10 and 14 days without doing big mileages of 200 miles one day and 300 miles the next, you can really get a lot of diversity. And I think that's a really good selling point for our area. So starting with Maryland, lots of Civil War history, as I'm sure you know. Maryland and Virginia had some of the pivotal battles. As you can see here, Appalachian Mountains, it's one of the oldest, it is the oldest US mountain range. So therefore, those lovely rolling mountains, beautiful countryside, and all kinds of outdoor recreation in this area. Great little covered bridges that we all like, and towns like Frederick. Which again are a big contrast to cities like Baltimore. Baltimore, obviously made famous by the film Hairspray, has had a huge regeneration in recent years. I mean, I see a change every time I go. This area here is the Inner Harbor. You can get out on the water, you can dine, you can shop, you know, do anything from a duck tour upwards really to a much longer boat tour. You can also go around Fells Point area, which is really nice for boutique shopping, dining, again, antique shops, browsing. The National Aquarium is in Baltimore too. There's a lot to keep you occupied, and it's very easily accessible as well if you are coming from DC by train, if you're not on a fly drive itinerary. Annapolis is the capital of Maryland, and I was lucky enough to go there again late 2019. It sits on the water, as you can see. You can take a lot of historic walking tours of this city. Everything about Annapolis is really the Chesapeake Bay and the beautiful surroundings that you have here. The US Naval Academy is a really great tour to take. You know, it just gives you a massive insight into this famous academy here, which obviously, you know, you can't tour the whole campus, but you can tour quite a big deal of it. And of course, the Chesapeake is about chilling out, relaxing. So it's perfect if you've been to DC and you've been sort of doing a lot of city sites, you just want a completely different vibe. This is where you will get it. The seafood is amazing, as you can imagine here. It's all about getting out on the water, whether it's in a kayak, on a boat, enjoying the seafood. I've been to one of the crab shacks that you can see here down on the far right-hand corner, and it's really great fun, family-style dining, and just really, you know, a lovely way just to sit and enjoy the scenery, but also some great food. Again, some more shots of the Chesapeake Bay. Beaches, crabs, and you know, the lighthouses on stilts are the Maryland's kind of very unique lighthouses. The bottom right hand corner shows the Inner Perry Cabin, which is a resort. It's beautiful, it's 5-star, and it was where, I'm not sure whether you remember, a comedy called The Wedding Crashers was filmed. If you ever saw it, it basically is based and was filmed all around here. Assateague Island, where our famous ponies are residents. Rumor has it that they were washed up originally with the Spanish galleon shipwrecked, and obviously still there today. Obviously not the original ones, but the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel links Maryland and Virginia, and as you can see, is an engineering feat in itself. Virginia Beach, which is where you would take the Chesapeake Bay Tunnel up to Maryland, or back the other way, depending on which way you're coming. I've been here with my family and I really do love it. It's an Atlantic beach, as you can see, huge expanse of sand. You can get out on kayaks and do dolphin watching. You can do boat tours, any manner of water sports. No problem with social distancing, as you can see with these shots here. And it's just a really great family style destination. And again, if you've been in DC and you really need to just spend some time kind of just doing nothing, it's a great place to do that. So up the road from Virginia Beach, you'll find an area which is linked by something called the Colonial Parkway. It's the historic triangle, and it's 3 destinations: Jamestown, Williamsburg, and Yorktown. Jamestown is a living history museum of where the very first English settlers landed in 1607. And then you fast track to colonial Williamsburg, which again is another attraction, telling the story of colonial times. And you can visit the smithy, the governor's mansion. Many of the buildings, the majority of them are original. You can spend 1 or 2 days here. It really is a fantastic attraction. And then you have Yorktown, which is where the Battle of Independence was obviously fought. So it's a 3-pronged story of the colonial history in this area. Busch Gardens, another great attraction that I've been to with my family. So you may know of the one in Tampa, Florida, and it's very similar. Obviously, those killer rides, if you want them, as you can see here, or just shows. And I'm not very brave at the big rides, but there's plenty to enjoy if you don't like those fairly, squeamish-inducing rides. I think they are anyway. Richmond is quite close to Williamsburg, famous for its Civil War history. As you can see, it's on the water there. When I was there with my family, also went to the King's Dominion theme park, which was excellent, and water country as well in this area. To the right, you can see some shots of our vineyards. This is a great thing to do if you're in this area. Charlottesville sits at the base pretty much of the foothills of the Shenandoah National Park and the Blue Ridge Mountains. As you can see in that picture there, the mountains are visible in the distance. You can do a tour of 2 or 3 vineyards in an afternoon where you get collected and taken back again. You can opt to have lunch included or cheese plates and all kinds of different varieties of tour. Monticello in Charlottesville, I really enjoyed this tour. I've done it a couple of times. This is Thomas Jefferson's plantation home. Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers, of course, so it's a really interesting story and beautiful grounds here. Again, in Charlottesville, very close to the Blue Ridge Mountains. You're about 60 miles from the Skyline Drive here. So it's just a stunning area. The Blue Ridge Parkway is about 400 miles long, over 400 miles long. You will not be doing all of that. The Blue Ridge Parkway heads north up into the Shenandoah National Park, and the Skyline Drive is just over 100 miles. I've been on various different trips here. I've seen bears about 3 times, and you get to see some amazing wildlife in this area. I think it's always a great surprise if you get to see something like a bear in the wild. But I was doing a barbecue once and 3 bears appeared, which was a little bit scary, I'm not going to lie, but it's really a stunning area here. Horseback riding, all manner of outdoor recreation that you'd expect in a national park. Very well organized. You've got ranger talks and walks as well. And if you just literally want to drive the Skyline Drive and pull out at lots of little different picnic areas and waterfalls, you can do that as well. It's not somewhere where you need to be at Bear Grylls, putting on your rucksack and hiking for 2 days. You know, you can literally just pull out, and the waterfalls and some beautiful areas for picnics, etc., right there. Some more vineyards. Obviously, we like our wine in Virginia. Lovely thing to do, sitting out looking at the scenery in the warm weather. Just going back really to the DC area, Mount Vernon is George Washington's plantation home. So again, a really great day trip if you want from Washington, DC. It sits on the Potomac River. Really, really interesting story, of course, there. And Alexandria and Arlington are 2 towns, if you don't want to stay in DC itself, they serve DC and are very well linked with the train system there. I know that the Platinum Fly Drive, the captivating capital region, actually uses Arlington rather than downtown DC. And obviously it's famous for the National Cemetery there too. We obviously have 4 distinct seasons. At this time of the year, the cherry blossom is amazing. My friends in Washington are putting all the amazing cherry blossom photos on their Facebooks at this time of the year. Summer is obviously can be pretty hot, but it's great if you're by the coast or in the mountains area. And obviously, even if you're in DC, everything is air conditioned. The fall is just stunning with all the oranges and reds that you get, particularly in the Shenandoah area. You know, I think we're always brainwashed to think of New England fall, and obviously not to take away anything from New England, but Virginia really does have some spectacular fall colour. It starts later and it actually goes on a lot longer too. So think of us in the fall as well as other times of the year. And obviously winter if you like the snow. So I'll leave you with that little snapshot of the capital region. Thanks for your time.
Now. Okay, thank you so much, Stella. That was brilliant. God, I know we have to. There's so much you could talk about, isn't it? It's absolutely fab.
Yeah, I don't particularly want to listen to myself saying it, but yeah.
I know. When you've listened to yourself over a couple of times, I know what it's like. Absolutely. Well, I think the first thing we should do is quickly ask Paula, because Paula, and I know we're watching time tonight, but Paula, you did it. You did this 2 years ago, and you said
I did, and it was like a drive through memory lane. We did all that. We stopped at Monticello, we did Virginia Beach, we did Annapolis, and we stayed in Arlington, and it was so easy to get in and out of the city. It was just, yeah, it was one of the best trips I've had to the US, you know, and we're so spoiled in this industry, and we've so many partners that we get over to visit, and so that we know all the product, we have all the product knowledge, but it was just beautiful. And it's one itinerary that I love. When somebody is inquiring about it, I thoroughly enjoy putting it together and back there on the trip with them and bringing them through it.
Yourself, is there? Once you've been there, you can totally sell it yourself then.
And Paula, then that was your first fly drive, really. Well, I know you didn't do the driving. I know there was a deadly of your lovely husband, but you enjoyed that whole experience of doing a fly drive holiday. I know we've been.
Yeah, I think before it was, we were always, again, we'd be with partners, and we were brought to all these beautiful destinations. So it was the first time we'd actually hired the car ourselves and done it independently. And the roads, they're so easy to maneuver. You know, they're not it's great for, I think, a real first, kind of a first fly drive, one of the first fly drives. You know, you've got New England, capital regions, and New York State, and they're all, the roads are great to find yourself around. They're not intimidating. I think that's probably the word. And there's just so much history, you know, there's just so much history around the place, and scenery. And we went up to Shenandoah, so we got a taste of everything. The only complaint I had is that we didn't have enough time. You know, we were trying to cram as much as possible in there, and it was beautiful, but it just makes you want to go back, and that's what we'll be doing.
I know, we all go back. So American history is huge, Della, isn't it, really? I mean,
it is, yeah, and there is so much of it there in that area, particularly in that kind of, like I said, the Colonial Parkway, which links those three destinations. So it does sort of give you the beginning of the English story, if you like, in the US, and then the middle part where there's kind of like this thriving colonial city, and then the Yorktown, which is obviously where the Americans decided they didn't want us anymore and threw us out. So it is really interesting, but it's also a great family destination, you know, too. So, you know, if you've got children, and you know, you don't necessarily want to overdose on history, although I think the Americans are so good at making it fun and interactive. You know, in a museum in the States, to me, is always just, you know, great. It's just not a boring experience. So yeah, I mean, and there's lots of other family things too. Like I said, you know, we went to King's Dominion theme park in Richmond, and they've got a water country, Busch Gardens, the same one that you find in Florida, but on a different theme. So yeah, it's kind of a great variety, really. That's the main thing.
Brilliant. There's so much to do. Well, I know we could talk about it for ages, so we'll jump on to questions real quick and see. We just take a couple of questions, Paula. We can, any generals we can keep as well.
Yeah, no problem at all. Just the visitors' attractions. I know Smithsonian's fantastic because a lot of the entrants are complimentary, but the attractions, if somebody is doing one of the fly drives, just going around the different areas, are there passes they can buy, or do you recommend that they plan out their visits and they book them in advance independently?
There are passes, like for example, when you get down to the Williamsburg area, you can get passes that include the various different attractions and not just have to pay individually as you go along. So, I mean, obviously you can pre-book. It's always quite a nice thing to do because you've budgeted for it then, I think, as well, rather than actually then kind of, getting there and then paying out as you go along. Obviously, when you're in DC, like you say, a lot of it is free, but you can also go to the the things that aren't free, like the International Spy Museum and the Newseum. There are about two of the only museums that you do actually have to pay for because they're independently owned. But it's just so easy, really, as you saw, Paula, really getting around and, you know, planning your trip. It's pretty easy going kind of wherever you go. You know, when you go into Shenandoah, you'll get a newsletter when you come through the ranger station at the start, whichever entry point you use. I mean, I came through Front Royal on my family holiday, which is only kind of an hour and a half from DC. So I think that's the other thing, like you said, you know, you kind of, it's not a massive area to cover. You just need to go back and do things that you haven't done before. But you know, it's not a huge distance. I think that's quite an appealing thing for most Brits and Irish, that we just don't want to be constantly behind the wheel of a car, do we?
No, definitely not.
I'm sorry, that question was from Sarah. Mary's just asked, what duration would you recommend? Like, obviously you're not going to see everything, but what duration for a fly drive, what duration would you recommend?
Well, I've done it when my first family holiday, when my children were quite small, then they were like 7 and 9. We didn't actually do the Maryland bit. We literally just did DC down through Virginia to the Shenandoah National Park, and then through Charlottesville, Williamsburg, and Richmond. And we actually did that in like 9 nights, 10 days, and then back up to DC to fly home. You know, the furthest point kind of south you're probably going to go on that fly drive would be Virginia Beach. That's 200 miles in a straight shot up to DC. So, you know, the flights home are normally in the evening. You can easily just get back there and fly out. So I did like I said, about 10. To include Maryland, I would say 10 to 14 days if you can.
Relaxed.
You know, just to give yourself enough time just to have, you know, you don't want to be moving on every night. You know, you want to be able to absorb the atmosphere in places like Shenandoah and, you know, and the beaches and things like that. It all depends on what you want to do, but easily 10 to 14 days.
Perfect. Neil has actually asked, it's kind of rather than destination specific, it's do you all think the negative feelings towards the US created by Trump and Trump supporters, etc., over the past 4 years are being quickly forgotten?
Yes. It's Biden bounce. Tony knows all about this because, you know, the President Biden with his Irish connections, you know, is, I think, a win for the US, you know, and the Irish love the US anyway, you know, and as you said at the beginning, Kira, I think that the thing is, the minute you go out there, you're welcome. Like, they hear your accent and they just want to know all about you. They want to know what you're doing there. You know, they want to try and tell you about all the best places. So I think obviously with Trump, the administration, there was an awful lot of headlines, a lot of drama. And I think maybe, you know, that with a change of administration, whatever your politics, I think change is always good, really.
Absolutely. And I think most people know that the extremists are the extremists, and really they were a small minority. But I mean, a lot of Trump supporters are very good people, very good Republicans, Democrats. It doesn't really matter where you lie. Most people are good people. So I think as you said, Della, we're moving on and we see past that. So I don't think anything's going to stop us, because I think we just want to get back. We won't put Chris on the spot just yet. We won't ask him his political opinion. Don't worry, Chris. We'll ease you in gently. So. Sorry, Paula, we'll do one more, Paula, and then we'll move on. I don't want to keep too long on questions at the moment.
Yeah, perfect. Steve has just asked, how do the autumn colours compare in Virginia compared to New England? Would you recommend a leaf-peeping self-drive in the Blue Ridge Mountains and Smoky Mountains?
Yeah, I mean, I'd totally recommend it. I've even been there kind of like as late as, you know, end of October, beginning of November, and the colours have still been out. So obviously it's a little bit like New England. It is, you know, slightly difficult to predict exactly, because it does depend on the change in the weather. I mean, obviously we get it later because we're warmer, you know, we're further south. Obviously Virginia to say someone like Maine, for example, it's a big distance. So in the north they're going to get those you know, temperature changes which make the leaves change. But yeah, you can do all kinds of things, and at the moment it's the cherry blossom season, so you've got there's things like bud cam and things where you can actually look at the foliage live, a bit like you say the leaf peeping in New England. So there's plenty of these interactive kind of webcam things you can go on to check the colours, or even the spring foliage like there is.
I think you're going to have competition, because I think Will is going to tell you that New York State has stunning foliage colours, and Chris is going to tell you the same, and Julie's going to find a way.
Fantastic fall foliage.
Absolutely. Julie's going to find a way as well. So, okay, so I know there's more questions, Paula, there, but we'll try and do a couple more each time, just so we're staying on track.
Right.
So just briefly, welcome, Chris. Do you want to unmute yourselves there, because we're doing New England next? So welcome to, I know it's still daytime there. I think you're muted. You want to unmute there? We told everybody we'd a real life American, Chris. Don't let us down.
I'm here. I'm here, live and in person. And it's afternoon here and a little cooler than I thought it was going to be, but that's okay. It's spring and there's a weather saying in New England, if you don't like it, wait a minute, it'll change. So we'll deal with that. But it's great to be here. Thank you for having us. And, Tony's the expert. I'm just here to give you the latest, if you want, some questions later about, I think you were talking about what's going on here in the States, and happy to do that.
Brilliant. Okay, well, definitely that. Well, we're thrilled you joined us as well, Chris. And you and I have met a couple of times at this stage, so we'll meet in real life, please God, one day. But this year we've had a few meetings and it's been great, absolutely great. So we're delighted you're here. So what we'll do is we'll hand over to Tony, and no pressure, Tony, and we'll all mute and I'll let you share screen, Tony. It should all work for you there now.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ciara. Thanks for having us on. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the presentation. Now, so so I'm going to tell you a little bit about New England and all of the great things that you can see and do there. I've only got maximum of 10 minutes. So, one of the things I struggled with today getting this presentation together was trying to, do justice to all the various things, the 6 states and everything in New England. But it's really just to give you a very high level, I suppose, understanding of what New England is all about. So just to begin, yeah, there we go. So where is New England? I know some people do know and some people don't. So it's in the extreme top right-hand corner of the United States. So tonight with Platinum Travel is all about the East Coast. This is up the very, very top of the continental United States. There are 6 states in New England. You've got Connecticut, you've got Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And it's a really, really big region. It's about 3 times the size of Ireland. So about 180,000 square kilometers. So lots and lots of space. But it's got a population of 15 million people. So it's not super densely populated. Yes, there are big cities there like Boston and Providence and what have you, but it's got lots of great outdoors and lots of wilderness as well. And it's one of the oldest settled places in the United States. So they've got a history that goes back in terms of European history about 400 years. So it's got a really rich history, rich culture. As I said, there's some really great scenery and outdoors and obviously outdoor activities that can be done there. And it's got a really sophisticated culinary scene. So that's really, really great. I think it's also important to say that it's probably the most Irish part of the United States. there's people have settled there from Italy, from England, from Poland, Portugal, so many different places. But the biggest ethnic group in New England is Irish people. So about 20% of the population in New England describe themselves as being of Irish descent. So in some ways, when you go there, you'll find us a little bit familiar in some ways. You'll see a lot of Irish names and, Irish restaurants and pubs and shops and what have you. So something different, but also a little bit of familiarity there as well. So in terms of getting there, I'm happy to say that we have really, really great connectivity to New England. Aer Lingus have a direct flight from Dublin to Boston, and also Shannon to Boston as well, if that makes more sense for you. There's 3 flights per day under normal circumstances from Dublin. So again, very, very frequent. And you have Delta as well, up until now, it's been a seasonal flight from Dublin to Boston. But before the pandemic, they were looking to go all year round with that. It's the shortest transatlantic flight that you can do. So 6 hours and 30 minutes over and a little bit under 6 hours back. So not too long at all. When you get there, when you get to Boston, Boston Logan Airport is actually really, really central. So it's only about 10 minutes taxi ride from downtown Boston. But you also have the option, if you want, they've got a free courtesy bus that will take you from the airport right into the downtown area. We also, before the pandemic, there was a Dublin to Hartford flight. I know that Aer Lingus, they're not putting it on this year, but they tell me that it will be back on next year. So that gives you a little bit of a dynamic where you could perhaps fly into Hartford and then out of Boston. So Hartford is west of Boston in Connecticut. So great opportunities there for doing a fly drive. So just, I suppose, you know, as we were talking about earlier on, just in terms of safety and the response to COVID-19 in New England, as I said before, like the vaccination program is really doing very, very well in the United States. They're on average, about 29% of people across the US have been vaccinated. But in terms of the states of New England, they're actually even a little bit ahead of the average. So they're looking at about 33% and counting, and it really is moving very, very quickly. It's going up every day. But all through the pandemic, the states of New England, they really put public health as their #1 priority. And just like ourselves over here, you know, they had to close hospitality down to various degrees. But right now, as things are starting to get better, restrictions are being eased and restaurants are starting to increase their capacities, and things are starting to get back to normal, which is really, really great. So in terms of timing, you know, New England will be ready to welcome you shortly. When to go? You know, it's in terms of seasons, there's definitely 4 very distinct seasons in New England. Springtime is usually pleasantly warm, and it's also a time when you get the best value in terms of accommodation. Summertime is usually hot and sunny. So in the north of New England, it's usually about 21 degrees Celsius. So, you know, pleasantly warm. And then in the south of New England, about 26 degrees. So really, really great for beach holidays. In winter, it's cold and snowy. There's no bones about that. You know, it's definitely, you know, it's going to be cold. But, you know, if you're into winter sports, you know, it's a great place to be able to do that. But I think that the one time, and we've kind of touched on this before, you know, about the fall foliage, New England is really, really famous for fall foliage. And it's just a stunning display every autumn. And it's a function of the very cold winters that we have in New England and the warm summers, that you just get this incredible natural display of color throughout all the trees out in the wilderness. So absolutely incredible. So as I said, I don't have time to tell you everything about all the different states. There's just so much to go through. So I'll just give you a very, very quick overview, a little bit about each state in New England. So Massachusetts is the biggest state by population. It's home to Boston, which is the biggest city as well. But I'm going to talk about Boston a little bit later on in the presentation on its own. But outside of Boston, there's some really, really great things to do. I mean, you've got Cape Cod, which is a peninsula that's, you know, it's beautiful, quaint New England towns, stunning beaches. It's great for summer vacations. There's a fantastic JFK connection there. You've got the Kennedy compound in Hyannis, and a fantastic JFK museum. So if you're into, you know, that kind of history, there's some great things to see and do. And it's also a fantastic place to go and see whales, whale watching cruises. One of the best places in the world, actually. And cruises go from the coast of Massachusetts all the time in the summer months. You also have cities like Salem, which is, I suppose, infamous is probably the best word for the witch trials that they had in the 1600s. And nowadays, you know, it's got a great interpretive center to help you, you know, learn about the history of the witch trials and what have you. But it's also got some really great colonial era architecture, like the House of the Seven Gables, which was, you know, made famous by the novel of the same name by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And, you know, Salem is just a very short drive from Boston, about 30 minutes. And if you go there in the summertime, there's a nice ferry trip that you can take if you want to do it that way instead. Looking out to the west of Massachusetts, you know, you've got a beautiful area called the Berkshires, beautiful rolling countryside. But it's also got some really great cultural institutions. The Boston Symphony Orchestra move there every summer. It's their summer location, so they put on concerts all throughout the summer. But there's also great art galleries and other cultural institutions that are dotted throughout Western Massachusetts. It's really, really great to check out. So just moving on to Rhode Island. So south of Massachusetts is Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is the smallest state in all of the United States. It's got 1 million people, and although it's small, it certainly punches well above its weight in terms of the kind of things that you can do there. The biggest city is Providence, which is about the same size as Cork City, just to give you an idea of the kind of scale that's involved. But it's an absolutely beautiful city to walk around. It's crisscrossed by, I think it's 3 or 4 different rivers, so you're never very far away from, you know, river banks and you know, that kind of an experience. So very, very pleasant to walk around, and there's some beautiful really nice neighborhoods like Federal Hill, amazing food scene, and just a really, really great place to go and see. Just down the coast a little bit is the town of Newport. So Newport is it's a coastal town. It's got a great tradition of sailing, and it's actually twinned with Kinsale in County Cork, and in many ways they're actually very, very similar with the kind of you know, the kind of culture that they have going on there with great, you know, sailing and seafood and all that. But one thing that they do have in Newport that they don't have in Kinsale is the Gilded Era mansions, and these are really, I mean, for want of a better word, they're palaces. They're really incredible. But there's a beautiful walk that you can do, a 5-kilometer coastal walk, where you can visit these coastal mansions, and just incredible, sumptuous interiors. They were built about 100 odd years ago by wealthy industrialists as holiday homes, but absolutely beautiful. So you take the cliff walk, you've got the ocean on one side and you've got the mansions on the other. So absolutely stunning place to visit. Moving on to Connecticut. Connecticut is in between Massachusetts and New York, and in Western Connecticut you've got, you know, a lot of kind of commuter areas for people going into New York City, but it's got you know, I think the best way to describe it is a cosmopolitan New England feel, and fantastic coastal towns, beautiful beaches. Places to note would be, say, Hartford. As I said, they're under normal circumstances there was a direct flight into Hartford, Connecticut. So great place to fly into, and then maybe out of Boston. New Haven as well, home of Yale University, and then also Mystic as well is another great place to see. But as well as these great coastal towns, they also have really, really great cultural traditions as well. So they've got, like, say for example, the Mark Twain house is in Hartford, where he wrote Huckleberry Finn and a few other of his novels. So yeah, great cultural things to see and do in Connecticut as well. New Hampshire. So moving north in New England, New Hampshire is it's a very rural, I suppose, place for most of the part. I mean, yes, there are some smaller cities in New Hampshire, but I think, you know, in terms of things that you can see and do, it's really great for outdoor activities. They have some of the biggest mountains in New England are in New Hampshire, so really great opportunities for hiking, biking, kayaking. Absolutely great for outdoor activities. And then in winter time, they're very well geared up for all kinds of winter sports. They've got world-class ski resorts. If skiing is not your thing, maybe snowmobiling or taking a sleigh ride are great ways to enjoy the snow and the outdoors without actually, you know, falling over, like I know that I would so much. And then onto Maine. So Maine, Maine is it's the biggest state in terms of its surface area, and just looking at the map, it's actually about the same size as Ireland, so it's really, really big, but it only has about a third of the population of Ireland. So, you know, it has really incredible wilderness, and I mean, it's not just countryside, it's unspoilt wilderness. It's absolutely just incredible. And I think a testament to that is that they have the biggest moose population outside of Alaska. So, you know, there's great opportunities for wildlife spotting, and really just, you know, getting off the beaten track and seeing some proper wilderness. But as well as those kind of like the I suppose countryside and wilderness that's in the interior, it's also got 5,000 kilometers of coastline, and that coastline is dotted with these beautiful, you know, small cities and towns all the way along. Some amazing, very scenic lighthouses, and a really great food scene. I mean, they're famous for their seafood, especially lobsters, which they export all around the United States. But really, really great place to visit. And, you know, one of the, I suppose, the main cities within Maine is Portland. Portland, you know, just to put it into context, would be about the same size as Galway. Not a huge city, but a really, really, you know, a great food culture, and lots of, you know, I suppose, bohemian art and what have you. So great place to visit. So just finally, Boston, I think, you know, a lot of people are, you know, familiar with Boston, and it's one of the oldest major cities in the US, and its history goes back to 1630. But I think some things just to point out about Boston, although it is a big city, and it's you know, it's a little bit bigger than Dublin, really. But it's a very leafy city. It's got lots of park space. And whenever you're there, it doesn't feel, you know, that you're on top of people. There's a lot of space to be able to, you know, move around and not really be in crowds. So really, really good like that if social distancing is an issue when you go. But you know, yes, it does. It's got all of the old, you know, the history. It was a hotbed of, you know, American revolutionary thought and action back in the day. But as well as that, I think it's really important to stress all the kind of, you know, modern things that are going on in the city. It has a lot of third level education institutions around it, like Harvard and MIT. And there's a huge youthful influx in there as well. So yeah, it just helps keep it really, really vibrant, and there's lots of great things to do in that respect as well. If shopping is your thing, there's some really great shopping centers there. And if you're looking for, you know, outlet designer label shopping, you can get on a courtesy bus, and 40 minutes later, you'll be at Rentham Village Premium Outlets, which is just a gigantic shopper's paradise. Really, really incredible. So, you know, with it being such a short transatlantic flight, just 6+ hours, you know, it is kind of on the radar for city breaks as well. So just to keep that in mind. So I won't go in, I know I'm probably taking too long, so I won't go into the different packages that Platinum Travel have for New England. But, you know, anything you see on the website, it's really the beginning of the conversation, and the guys in Platinum Travel, you know, they'll be able to get you a holiday that's tailored to your specific needs. So, you know, do reach out to Kira about that. And just to close out, I'm just going to show you a very brief video that's, you know, should give you a good overview of all that New England has to offer. So there you go. So that's it for me. Over to you, Ciara.
That's brilliant, Tony. Thanks so much. And that's some mean feat now, covering all those states in such a short amount of time. And I think there's no doubt about it. We'll have to do a more in-depth US evenings, you know, down the road, where we can concentrate, because we're cramming so much into these 4 nights that it's near impossible to cover everything, absolutely everything. I noticed what you said about the Boston flight, and I remember a colleague of ours, Patricia, who told me that she did a flight from Boston to Shannon in 4 hours 55 minutes coming home, which was just absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it's, you know, the Canaries is 5 hours, so you know it's nothing of a flight. That shouldn't be the reason that you don't go. It's because of the flight. Absolutely shouldn't be a reason. I have loads of questions, but I'll let Paula start, and then we can talk to Chris then as well. Anything you want to just ask first there, Paula?
Yeah, there's one here from Neil. He's just asked, what new visitor attractions are there in New England in 2021 or are coming along in 2022?
Chris, there you go.
Well, it's funny you said that, because I sent to Tony a whole list of what's new in New England. And again, you know, things, I'm going to give you just a sample of some of them here as I'm going to look through them. So 4D Theater in Connecticut. We have newly designated scenic byways were announced, and I think there were 6 in just our New England states there. A lot of interest in glamping, and there's some of the new opportunities there. Maine especially has some of those. As you might expect, breweries and distilleries are still a big hit here too. And again, hotels are opening as well. That's one of the things to, again, just double check on, because new hotels are coming in, and some other hotels have changed ownership, changed styles as well. And another example in Massachusetts, the MGM Music Hall at Fenway, which is going to be interesting. How that plays out. So again, just samples. I think the other news I wanted to mention, I think Tony mentioned this about Rhode Island. There's I don't know if it's a Netflix, but there's a TV series not unlike what Downton Abbey was like. It's going to be filmed in the Newport area. So again, it's just a taste. I don't want to give you the whole thing because you'll be full and you won't come. I want you to just have a taste.
And it's so varied. I mean, I've done, I've been to New England, I've been to a couple of parts, but I mean, when you know, what we would always recommend, flying to Boston, do your few nights, go up the coast, come across into the mountains and come down. But what happens sometimes is you end up doing the same trip over and over. And we try and take as long as you can. I mean, diversify in different areas, you know, and even Connecticut, I know, have been working very hard in showcasing their state in the last number of years because of the Bradley route, which is absolutely brilliant. It's a super route. I wanted to amazing airport, and also the likes of Massachusetts. If you don't have that long and you can't do a big trip, stay in Massachusetts, and there's so many gorgeous areas in Massachusetts after a couple of nights in Boston, you know, that we tend to think Boston, Massachusetts, it's like the Manhattan, New York. You know, you need to get away from that way of thinking. And one thing that occurred to me, and we touched on this last night when we were talking to Utah and Colorado, is skiing. And skiing in New England, skiing in Europe is very, very expensive. And if you can get your head past going the opposite direction for skiing, I mean, the skiing options are amazing. I saw New Hampshire do amazing. I know everywhere does, but there was a particular program on New Hampshire here recently. So I presume you'd recommend that.
Well, since I grew up on skis, yeah, the bad news is it's been, I think, 15 years since I've done it, but it's like riding a bicycle, right? I think I can do that again. It's funny, literally in grammar school, in the elementary school level, we had 1 day per week that they weren't mandated, but you got free ski lessons. So we were able to go out, you know, to anything to get out of school, but this was a day on the mountain, and this was up in New Hampshire, White Mountains of New Hampshire. So again, yeah, skiing is underrated. And the thing we would also say, again, friends from the Utah, Colorado area have been east and then said, you know, if we can ski in the east, we can ski anywhere. So just know that the conditions, like right now, many of the ski areas are starting to slow down or close down. It's warming up. But then there's this big, massive bowl of skiing in Tuckerman's Ravine on Mount Washington that's very primitive. You don't get any lift lines. It's you walk up. Or I think they call it backcountry skiing. My son does that, and you can go up there and then ski down. So again, you can get all different experiences. And I think I just read Loon Mountain in New Hampshire is putting in what's 4 times 2 chairlift? It's a double quad, I guess. 8 people going up at one time.
Really, in one okay.
I don't know how you do that with social distancing, but apparently we're all going to be over it next winter, so they'll be fine.
Absolutely. And what I love about the skiing in the States is that if you fly to Boston, want to do a night or two in Boston, take your car. You know, you become, when you ski in Europe, you're very much in the resort and you don't budge for the week. You stay there, you don't budge, nobody drives, it's what you do. Whereas if you go to the States, you can, because you guys are so good at, you know, keeping the roads looked after, you can ski and go off and do a bit of outlet shopping or go off to another town. And it's much more convenient, and the value is unbelievable. It's because the flights out of Ireland in the winter are much cheaper than they are in the summer, which is great. And that brings me to another question that I just saw there. Cape Cod seasons. One trip we've had very popular with families is, again, going down to Rhode Island, doing the Boston, coming down then around by Newport, like you said, which is gorgeous, and then going down to Cape Cod and maybe taking a house and go to Chatham or Hyannis or wherever they're going to go. But you can see the prices do rocket come a particular date in June. Like, season-wise, how early can you go to Cape Cod and find it pleasant? Because people would take their children out of school, or a lot of kids finish here at the end of May. You know, would you be very nervous about the weather that early, or would you be okay?
No, and again, it depends. You know, high season, you're going to get that. Okay. July and August, especially. June, it starts. But an example, I use my family as an example, that we would go from New Hampshire to Cape Cod for our vacation as children. And, you know, I'm a little mad at my mom now because she left me out in the sun and I've got all these freckles. And but in June, it's fine. In May and June, we were taken out. Actually, we would go to off season. You know, I would tell you my favorite time to visit Cape Cod is either May or September, and that's primarily because it's not high season.
And it's not
and you get the benefit of everything else. The weather's just a little bit different. It might be a little cooler at night, but you're on the coast. It's going to be beautiful.
It's going to be, and of course, if you go over to Martha's Vineyard, it's just near Nantucket. I was lucky to be in Nantucket. Just the most gorgeous island, beautifully guest houses and B&Bs and places you can stay. And it's what I love about it is so rustic.
Yeah,
I know I could talk about it forever. I mean, see, Paul, is there any other questions there? I think I left in on one of them.
Yeah, there's one there as well. RVs, we're getting lots of inquiries now for RV trips. What are the facilities like? Susan's just asked for RV holidays.
Yeah, we've been seeing this a lot, haven't we, Tony? Last week, I think we had this as well with the global marketplace and rental homes, you know, vacation home rentals now too. And that's, again, that inventory, I would tell you, is having to build up a little bit. We've been talking with some of the vacation home, you know, suppliers, and they're looking for that because folks are, you know, starting to leave the city and buying those places now too. So I think there's an opportunity there from an RV standpoint between, you know, national, state, and private campgrounds. You won't have a problem. Again, there are major suppliers, but that's really what we were meant for. And you know, for your travelers, we welcome you, because last summer and probably most of this summer, it's going to be domestic folks. And that's what they're doing. They're also taking the motorhomes and the RVs to get away. And a lot of it was schooling. We're going to take our kids and go school wherever we want to go.
Yeah, where they can. And I think people have to remember that, you know, campsites, we mentioned this last night as well, wherever you're going to park your RV, they can vary in price from $10 a night to $100 a night, depending on the facility. Then the popular areas have to be booked in advance. So, and of course, RVs on a one-way basis. If you're going to pick up in one place and drop off another, right, you need to book those in advance as well. The last question, just, well, from me, that I was going to touch on is, how are things generally going? I know you're covering a lot of states, but vaccination-wise, opening up wise, things are good. Are you're happy where you are?
Yeah, in fact, I think 2 of the states, I'm looking at Tony because our expert in market, but I think 2 of the states actually are the highest rate of vaccination in the United States. And I think Massachusetts is one. I may be wrong with the other, but I believe it might be Maine. And again, it's the percent of people. But I've had 1 jab already, Pfizer, and the next one is coming April 23rd. So it's really coming out. My wife's a nurse and she is volunteering, and every weekend they did 4,000 a day at one. So that's the real goal. This administration has a big plan. They actually think ahead, and they've really put out that this is going to be something that we're going to get under control first. That's not to say, as you've all seen, I'm sure, Americans are not all brilliant. You've seen what's been going on in other regions. They're not on this call, so I won't mention them. But everyone's tired. You know, everyone's tired. And I listened to that CDC director. She's actually from a Boston hospital. And she mentioned, folks, please, just a little bit longer. So we're seeing a lot more travel. I think if everyone continues to follow the rules, you know, mask, distance,
Of course.
will be, but it's really opening up quickly.
It's moving in the right direction. And Chris, don't be disheartened. We're the same here. Everybody's, you know, there are always going to be groups everywhere that just can't keep it. You know, they need to, and that's just society, and that's democracy, and that's free will, and that's what people will do. So we just have to hope the majority wins, which it will. So we're on the right road, absolutely the right road. Have you any more questions there, Paula, before we?
No, not at the moment. I think Tony covered so much already. So some of the questions that were coming in, Tony had already answered during his presentation. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chris, as well. I'm sure we might have questions at the end, but that's brilliant. Thank you so much.
I'm going to have to run. I'm going to let Tony do it.
Oh, Grant, we'll think of all the hard questions for him, but thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it, and hopefully you'll have a lot more Irish accent coming your way soon.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Take care. Bye. Now, so Julie, sorry to keep you, Julie and Will. So I let you share your screen there, Julie, and you are good to go. And we'll mute video and introduce Philadelphia. And this is such a cool city. I'm really looking forward to seeing this because I'm a bit of a Philly fan, I have to say.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Julie, and I would just like to take you through the city of Philadelphia very, very briefly. So I'm going to start off with a very, very quick video just to give you a little bit of a taster of what we can offer you in the city. So I don't know if any of you have been to Philadelphia before or have any expectations at all, but we're actually really quite similar to Boston in the fact that we're a very, very small city. Getting here as well couldn't be easier. So this is where we're situated. We're situated halfway between Washington, DC and Boston, accessible by the Amtrak, so 2 hours to Washington and an hour and a half away from New York City. I've put this slide in here just to emphasize the fact that at this time, if you are traveling into Philadelphia, whether as a city break or actually onwards to another place like the Caribbean or Florida or wherever else, but you're staying over here for a stopover, and you actually do need a COVID test, we actually do have this at the airport at the moment. Obviously, we are very hopeful that COVID is going to be eradicated and we will not need this in the future. But for the time being, we have it at the airport if you do need to make a trip into the States once traveling is allowed back. So once you've arrived into Philadelphia as a domestic passenger, because obviously from Dublin you do have the pre-clearance, you can actually get a taxi or a rail from the airport. So if you're going to get a taxi, it's about 25 minutes by taxi, and if you're going to get a rail ticket, it's going to be about 25 minutes, and it takes you straight into downtown. So the question that we always get asked is, if we're going to come to Philly, where should we stay? Whilst Philadelphia is the 6th largest city in the United States, and actually going back to what Tony was saying about Boston, again, we actually have a very, very large Irish heritage as well. When clients actually come in and stay in the city, they are actually going to stay in the centre city area, which is where this oblong is. So as you can see, it's very compact. You can actually walk from river to river within about 1 hour and north to south within about 40 minutes. So if you decide that you would like to come to Philadelphia but actually by Amtrak because you're taking in New York or Washington, D.C., you will actually arrive into 30th Street Station, which is located over here. Once you arrive by rail, you can then get the local underground to wherever your hotel is. As I said, this is all very, very, very walkable. And there are actually railway stations, or tube stations, should I say, actually located throughout. So very, very easy. You will see also that we have some great neighbourhoods. The one that you will probably visit if you're coming in for a couple of days, that is going to be the Cultural District, which is where the Liberty Bell is housed. And again, it's highlighted just over here on the red box. So in this area, again, very, very walkable. We've got the Liberty Bell, the National Constitution Centre, Constitution Hall. And again, if any of you have been to Boston, you will actually see that some of the buildings are very, very similar. That is because obviously they're very closely twinned, but also we were the first capital as well. So this is what we have to offer you. We have history, we have art, we are very, very foodie, tax-free shopping, and we also have some unique finds. So the history I've kind of touched on very, very briefly, the Liberty Bell and Constitution Hall. We are also the first World Heritage City in the United States as well. We've got this accolade in 2015. World-renowned art, we have the Barnes Foundation, which is the largest collection of post-impressionist art in the United States. Actually, if you want to see anything that's in this museum, you actually have to visit because none of this actually travels, as well as the Philadelphia Museum of Art as well, which you will probably know mostly as Rocky Steps as well. We are a foodie paradise. We have over 1,500 restaurants and pop-up restaurants throughout the city. And in the summer, you know, it's a fabulous place to be. Tax-free shopping. Tax-free on shoes and clothes up to no value. This is done at source, so the price you see on the ticket is the price that you pay. And outdoor adventures. So again, once you've been sightseeing, you've done your hop on hop off tour, you've dined, you've been to Reading Terminal Market, which is the world's the USA's oldest farmers market. You've been to the Museum of Art, you've been to the Barnes Foundation. We have plenty of trails that you can walk as well. And we have fabulous nightlife. Much like was mentioned previously, in the last year, we've actually had quite a lot of new hotels being built and that have opened. And I've actually specifically mentioned hotels here because of the new Four Seasons property, which opened in September 2019. There is a fabulous bar on the 60th floor, which I think is really, really well worth a visit, just for the views. The views are spectacular. And obviously you can have a few cocktails up there while you're there as well. Actually, this I think is actually taken in that bar. It's great views. So we have an international visitors guide, which is only 12 pages, where we actually have highlighted some walking tours, which take in, they're 2 or 3 days, and you can follow them through. They highlight all of the main areas, by the book, fashionable, so we've got nightlife as well, we've got shopping involved too, the unexpected and family friendly. Now, we can get these to you on a PDF, we can get these to Kira, who can then share them with you. And then we have the countryside of Philadelphia. So the countryside of Philadelphia takes in the areas just outside of Philly, which is the Valley Forge area and the Brandywine Valley. So actually these areas you can get to by car, approximately an hour's drive. And in these areas, you are going to have wine tasting and other activities. I'm just going to show you a quick video so you kind of get a taster of what there is there. So you can see that in the countryside, we have things and activities that are really good for families, not only hiking, biking, walking, but we've also got grown-up activities like beer tasting, wine tasting. Great for food. We're actually, this part of the country is actually the mushroom capital of the world, would you believe? So another reason to visit. But we've also got Legoland for children and other activities, I think, which is great for everybody. So thank you for your time. I hope that I've kind of assisted you with Philly and the countryside. If you have any questions, please do let me know.
That's brilliant, Julie. Thank you so much. Thanks so much. And again, I know when you're talking about a city like Philadelphia, it's hard to put everything in, and you really have to see it to experience it, don't you? You really do. And I know the videos massively help. I loved Philadelphia when I was there with you guys a few years ago. Kindly, you brought me as a guest to experience it, and it was absolutely brilliant. And we did the city, of course, which was brilliant. And I have to say, there were amazing hotels, absolutely amazing hotels, and the tax-free shopping, and the food, and the tours that we did, and the rocky steps and everything. But I think I have to say the highlight was the hot air balloon ride out in the country. Oh my God. I've never been in a hot air balloon before. And it was just one of those moments, and we can organize those for clients now, and to be able to send somebody up over that countryside was just breathtaking. So
and of course, the thing that I didn't mention is, well, there's train rides, there's kayaking, there's hot air balloon. I mean, there's so much to do that you can't kind of fit it and condense it in a 3-minute video.
And Philadelphia as a city itself is so compact, isn't it? Like, you can literally walk rocky steps to the Liberty Bell to the shopping. Like, it's a really condensed, small, compact city.
Yeah, please, if anybody does consider and does go to Philadelphia, please don't hire a car in the city. Please don't, because you will end up paying more money parking the car and you won't use it. I mean, you'll probably spend about $60 a day parking and not using it at all. So pick the car up after you've stayed in the city. Actually, it's very similar to Boston in that respect, that you just don't need the car, and then pick it up afterwards. But of course, the other thing is that Philly can be twinned quite easily, actually, with the the capital region, and New England, actually, and with New York State. So it's all very doable, and especially on the Amtrak, that's a perfect way of doing it. Especially if you don't want to drive.
Yeah.
And it's it's downtown to downtown all the way through, so it's really easy.
I know I did the train from Union Station in Washington, D.C. to Philly and vice versa. And it was, we were trying to get flights to Washington and we couldn't. So we ended up going to Philly, but it was actually something that we kind of had to do, but ended up being an absolute bonus because it was so convenient and we got to see Philly at the same time. So,
And so the other thing I did forget to mention, which is really important, is our airlift. Actually, American Airlines restarted the Dublin Philly route on Sunday. So after 12 months, the flight's back. So we're very happy about that. Shannon will actually restart, we think, in 2022. It would have been nice this year, but obviously with the restrictions, I don't think it's going to happen, but fingers crossed for next year. And the same thing with the Aer Lingus flight. We think that's going to be back next year too.
Fantastic as well. And you have some gorgeous new hotels. I know offers later on, and one of them is for the new Four Seasons. Is it just gorgeous? Is it like what we're all waiting for?
It's lovely, and there's a new W as well. So I mean, there's lots of new funky things happening. Yeah, but again, probably need another training session for that.
No, we're going to everything. Let Paula do the questions for you there, because I know I've talked a bit. I've probably covered a few things, but go on ahead there, Paula.
Yeah, you've a couple there, and I think yourself, Julie's just covered it there. Philly looks. Brendan says Philly looks and sounds amazing. If only we had, say, 5 to 7 days and we landed in Philadelphia, how many days should we devote to the city? And where else around Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, should we consider across those 5 to 7 days?
Okay, I would suggest that you stay at least 3 nights in Philly, purely because of the way the flights go and land. 3 nights is probably going to be ample for you to get around. Then pick up a car, then head up to the countryside. And then actually you could then go to into Amish country, which, you've got to do that natural kind of self-drive. That would be my advice. Or alternatively, again, getting back to the wide open spaces, people wanting wide open spaces. You've also got Atlantic City as well in New Jersey. You could pick up a train and then go out to New Jersey, which is just across the river, actually. So again, it's all very doable. Or again, you could pick up the Amtrak. There's so much to do. It's like, which one do you pick on first?
Definitely Atlantic City gets missed, and anybody does have any questions on Atlantic City, you're our go-to person for Atlantic City as well. So just does one time tonight, but it is actually super destination, and it gets stereotyped. It does get stereotyped, so there's an awful lot going on. If anybody does have questions, come to us, and Julie's will answer anything we have on Atlantic City. Sorry, Paula, go on.
No, you're grand. I have 2 more that we can ask there. Is it possible, Marion has asked, is it possible to combine a Philly City experience with a few days of golf? Are the courses accessible and reasonable?
Yes and yes is the answer. Again, it's going to be in the Brandywine Valley. You could do it. I mean, I'd have to check the golf courses out. But I think you will be able to do it quite easily. Is the answer.
Okay. And Neil has asked, are there any short tours?
Sorry, a golfer will always find a way. So we can find out for the golf. That's brilliant.
Neil has asked, are there any short city tours from the airport for those transiting? And if so, how long? And would you know any prices?
It's really going to be the hop on, hop off, which means you're going to have to come into the city. And I'm going to suggest there's probably about $25, $30 for the day, I think. But again, I can come back with prices.
I'm going to come in one quick question there. They're going to fire at Della very quickly. Della, there's a new Dulles train that started now, hasn't it? For anybody that's been to DC, I just wanted to mention that earlier and I forgot that has that started or it's about to start. Anybody knows that bottleneck?
Yeah, it was due to start, and then of course the whole COVID-19 situation started and delayed it again. But it will be soon. That link out to Dulles Airport, you're very right, Kira, on the metro rail. I mean, obviously, at the moment, what a lot of people do is they'll take Super Shuttle. I've done that myself. which is like a shared shuttle or a cab, or Washington Flyer. So there's lots of other ways of doing it, but yeah, we're still waiting for that to open.
It's coming.
Think out. It's very, very near.
Yeah.
It's all I can say.
I know, that'll be great. It's a great bonus. Absolutely,
it
great
should have
bonus.
been- it should have
Fantastic. Sorry
been
to put you on the spot.
No, it should have been open. You're absolutely right. It should have
Right.
been going now, but not at the moment.
Perfect. Thank you, Della. Sorry, and I know this because it's so convenient in Philly as well. Right, Paula, have we any more at all, or?
No, any the others that have come in, and again, Julie's actually covered them already in the video, the
Okay.
presentation. So thank you.
Her all together. Okay, so last but by no means least, Will, thank you so much for waiting to the end. I know we're all here to try to keep inspired, so you've been very good waiting, and we're really looking forward to what you have. So do you want to oh, I'm going to play the video for you first of all, isn't that correct? Yeah, so I'm just going to play a video, everybody, and then I'm going to let Will is going to change his screen then. So give me 2 seconds. Just mute my Okay, and Will I let you share your screen there for your presentation? And if there's any issues, you can just let me know.
Thank you very much, Kira, and thank you very much everyone for waiting and listening to the amazing presentation so far. I promise I won't keep you much longer. It is all about, and I know it's kind of the buzzword at the moment is outdoor spaces, but obviously New York is famous for New York City, but there's so much more. The reason it is called New York is because of New York State. I'm just going to run you through some of the main reasons why you should consider New York State as a main destination. So just a quick introduction. So it's made up of 11 vacation regions, and I'm going to run you through each one and just give you 1 or 2 reasons why you'd want to visit each of them. Obviously, as I mentioned, bookended by star attractions. So we have New York City in the very south, and then we have Niagara Falls in the very northwest. A lot of people obviously associate Niagara Falls with Canada, but the falls are actually on the US side. And people tend to visit the Canadian side for the hotel scenes and for the views as you look across back onto the falls. And then the last point there, obviously, a lot of this has already been covered before me today, that the Empire State borders 5 other US states. We've got Pennsylvania and New Jersey to the south, and then Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont to the east. And obviously, as I mentioned, a lot of that has already been covered. Just a couple of facts that people don't tend to know about New York State. So it's actually the 3rd largest in terms of wine production in the whole of the US. So plenty of vineyards and lots of different breweries and cideries as well. I know that's big for all Brits, but obviously you guys over in Ireland as well. And then, as I mentioned, outdoor spaces being the buzzword at the moment, and outdoor adventure and nature loving not a problem at all in New York State, with 179 national parks throughout the whole state. So just to give you a quick overview of the geography, as I mentioned, there's 11 different vacation regions, and I like showing them up when we start as well, just to show people how small New York City is in comparison to the whole state. So New York City, this very small area down in the very south, and then the state, as you can see, stretches all the way up to the Canadian border, and then all the way across again, Niagara with the Canadian border up here. And so just to give you an idea in terms of size, it's actually slightly larger than England in terms of land covered. So it gives you an idea in terms of how long it takes to get around. And in terms of getting around, it really does depend what people are looking for. I know the guys have mentioned before, if people are looking to hire a car, what we recommend is getting the train from New York City up into the Hudson Valley. And it hugs the Hudson River the whole way up, so it's actually a beautiful train ride. But the Amtrak runs from New York City all the way up to the Canadian border, and then from Albany, which is in the capital Saratoga region, all the way west to Greater Niagara. So you can get the train the whole way throughout the state if people don't want to drive. But as I mentioned, if people are going to fly drive, what I would recommend is the train to the Hudson Valley, and then also the car hire is about a third of the price, and you don't have to drive out of New York City, obviously, which is an absolute nightmare and can take half your day. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to quickly run through each vacation region and a couple of reasons why you might want to visit and what there is to see and do. So first of all, obviously we have Long Island out to the east of New York City. And as you can see from this picture, absolutely beautiful beaches, obviously famous for the Hamptons. But it's also a lot more than just the beaches. There was a question just then on golf. And it has a lot of state parks, and one of them being Bethpage. So that's obviously been used for a few golf majors in the past. But yeah, wineries all across Long Island. The North Fork and the South Fork are very different. So as I mentioned, North Fork for the beaches and the South Fork for the national parks. So it's a beautiful place to go and visit as an addition to New York City, or instead of New York City if you're looking to get away, and then before you head north into the rest of the state. So after you, as I mentioned, after you go east to Long Island, then as you head north, the first area you come as you come out of New York City is the Hudson Valley. And as I mentioned, the train line that hugs the Hudson River, you can actually see it in this picture here, just to the right of the words Hudson Valley there. As I say, if you saw my image on the Welcome to New York State when I first opened the presentation, that's the views you have the whole way up. And it's only about an hour when you get into Poughkeepsie. And as I mentioned, if you wanted to then hire your car. So the first image I've got here for the Hudson Valley is the CIA, which is the Culinary Institute of America. So this is where a lot of Michelin star chefs worldwide have come to be trained. And you can actually see in the inset picture bottom left here that you can have guided tours of the CIA. You can watch all the chefs in their lessons. And then at the very end, you can actually go to the canteen and you'll have meals cooked by those world-class chefs that you've literally just been watching. I think the tours start from about $20. So not bad at all to go and watch them cook the food and then actually get to taste it as well for $20. Second in the Hudson Valley is the old Rhinebeck Aerodrome. So this is obviously not for the faint-hearted, as you can see. The planes here date back to, some of them date back to World War I, but most of them date back to World War II. They've been obviously fully renovated, but they still have the outer shells to look exactly as they did back then. And you get your goggles and your headgear, and you can go up and have tours, obviously aerial tours of the Hudson Valley and the Catskill regions. I think they start from about $65 to $70 and last for about half an hour. So as I say, not for the faint-hearted, but definitely a once-in-a-lifetime experience and an amazing way to see the Hudson Valley and the Catskill Mountains. And speaking of the Catskills, that's the next region, slightly west of the Hudson Valley. As I say, it's a mountain range and only about 2 hours from New York City. So I know skiing was mentioned earlier. In New York State, there's actually over 50 downhill ski areas, and the Catskills is probably the most adventurous of those. So there are ski areas with black runs. It's not as adventurous as like an Aspen or Colorado, or some of the skiing that was mentioned earlier this evening. So it's more of a, you'd come for a holiday and then you maybe do 1 or 2 days skiing. You wouldn't come for a dedicated ski holiday. But somewhere else in the Catskills is the Bethel Woods Center for the Arts and the Woodstock Museum. And this is where Woodstock actually took place in 1969. So the site is dedicated obviously to that festival all those years ago. And you can go to the museum and hear the stories of all the different acts that performed, the Jimi Hendrix, and also about, there's obviously all the pictures of the cars that were just left for miles around, and people just walked to the festival. That I think they were expecting something like 10,000, and about 500,000 people turned up. So an absolutely amazing festival and a really interesting site to go and see. And they actually, obviously, when COVID permitting, they do have festivals on site at this, to this day. Moving slightly further north into the capital Saratoga region, and this and the region afterwards is kind of the sporty region of New York State. So the capital Saratoga, sorry, the Saratoga Racecourse is the 4th oldest in the whole of the US. So an amazing place to go and take in some sporting history, but also live sport at the same time. And as I mentioned, it's the sporting area. As you move into central New York, this is where 2 of the sporting Hall of Fames are. So if you're interested in your US sports, you have the Baseball Hall of Fame, which is in Cooperstown, which is the main image. And then you have the Boxing Hall of Fame, which is the inset image bottom right. International Boxing Hall of Fame, that is. So that's not just dedicated to US boxers, that's worldwide. They have boxing gloves dating back to the 40s and the 30s. And they also have a replica ring from the Muhammad Ali Joe Frazier fight in the 1980s. And then the area, the very north of New York State, right up by the Canadian border, is called the Adirondacks. And the Adirondacks is actually the largest state park in the US outside of Alaska. It covers about 6 million acres. And a lot of the footage that you saw in the video at the start was filmed up in the Adirondacks. Some absolutely amazing views. Obviously, getting back out into nature, lots of different activities that you can go and do, but also just absolutely stunning views. One other area in the Adirondacks that is well known worldwide is called Lake Placid. And there's lots of lakes throughout the Adirondacks, but Lake Placid, obviously the most famous. It's hosted 3 Winter Olympics, the most recent one in the 1980s. And as you can see here in the top right, you can the luge run is still there. So you can actually go down, you have a designated driver who will sit at the back and steer, and you can actually go down and experience how the Olympians would have experienced it back in the day. So moving slightly further west, as you come around Lake Ontario, is the Thousand Islands Seaway. So like a lot of New York State, Thousand Islands was where the New Yorkers back in the day would come and have their holiday. So a lot of these mansions built on the waterfront would be for the New Yorkers, for them to come up and spend their summer months. And this one pictured here is actually Bolt Castle. So George Bolt was a millionaire in the late 19th century, and he started work on Bolt Castle actually in 1900. And then it was stopped because his wife sadly passed away in 1904, and it lay in ruin until the 1970s, when the local authorities picked it up and they completed the castle, and it's now open for tours, and you can go and see. Obviously, they tried to keep it as accurate as it would have been back in the 1900s. Coming into the Finger Lakes, as I mentioned at the very start, New York State has a big affinity for wine, and the Finger Lakes is a region that is a big part of that. You can probably guess why it's called the Finger Lakes. So it's actually 11 lakes and they are all shaped like fingers if you look at them from above. And as you can see, the vineyards are all up on the hillsides. So not only do you get a lovely glass of wine, but you've got beautiful views to enjoy it with as well. And it's not all about being outdoors in the Finger Lakes. They also have 3 amazing museums. And I think someone mentioned earlier that museums in the US are completely different to museums over here. And that's definitely the case for all 3 of these. So the main image is the Strong National Museum of Play. And that is as fun as it sounds. It's a museum dedicated to all things children's play from the 1900s all the way up to today. So they have everything from the first ever Monopoly board, which was actually round, all the way up to today with your Nintendos, your PlayStations. And it's an interactive museum, and you can spend as long or short as you want. So you can spend 2 hours, you can spend a whole day. And they've actually now got a hotel on site because they do expect people to stay for more than one day. There's that much to see and do. Bottom right, you have the Corning Museum of Glass. And as you can see from the picture, they do glass blowing lessons. So people can actually go and blow their own instruments and in all different colors and shapes. It's actually the museum where all iPhone glass is produced. And then last but not least, in the bottom left, you have the George Eastman Museum. And George Eastman lived in Rochester, which is one of the cities in the Finger Lakes. And he was the founder of Kodak. So this is a museum dedicated to all things photography. And then last, but obviously not least, is Greater Niagara, right in the northwest of New York State. I don't think the falls need an introduction, but obviously I think, like I said at the start, a lot of people associate them with Canada and not with the US at all. But the falls are actually part of Niagara State Park. So you can walk through the state park, you can walk alongside the river before it drops over the edge and becomes the Niagara Falls. And a lot of the interaction with the falls is actually on the US side. So the Maid of the Mist is the boat tour, which goes right up underneath the Horseshoe Falls. And then the Cave of the Winds is, I know I think I've said once in a lifetime a couple of times, but this truly is once in a lifetime to go up underneath the falls. You go right up to the top there, which is called the Hurricane Deck, and you get absolutely soaked. So on the boat, obviously, you have your blue poncho. For the Cave of the Winds, you have your yellow poncho, but there's no point wearing the poncho if you go up to the Hurricane Deck because you just get absolutely soaked. But as I say, it's something that I think every person should experience once in their lifetime. And then finally, in Greater Niagara, you have Buffalo. And Buffalo have kind of been living with COVID almost since the early 2010s, because everything they do is outside. So this area is called Canal Side, so they have outside dining, outside shows, and obviously in the top right hand corner there you have the Buffalo Wing. So it doesn't come from a buffalo, it comes from the city of Buffalo. Anchor Bar is the name of the place where the Buffalo Wing was invented. And they have a Buffalo Wing tour that you can go on and get your different stamps at all the different restaurants. And then finally, for me, the newest attractions throughout New York State. So we have a trail called the Empire State Trail that opened in December 2020. So it's the longest multi-use state trail in the whole of the US. And it means if you had enough time, you could walk, cycle, kayak the whole state, the entire state, all the way from New York City up to the Canadian border and all the way from Albany west to Niagara Falls. And then finally, Legoland New York was due to open on July the 4th last year. Obviously, we all know what happened, so it's been pushed back to 2021. They haven't given an exact date yet, but it's looking probably around the same time, so sort of July time. And obviously, we all know the Legoland brand, so it's very exciting for it to come into the Hudson Valley of New York. And it's actually only about 20 minutes away from Woodbury Common Premium Outlets. So after the children have had their day, the adults can go and have their day, or vice versa, whichever way it fits. And that is everything for me. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass back to Kira for any questions.
That's brilliant, Will. Thanks a million. That was great. And God, I have to say, there's loads of memories there when you were showing videos or pictures of New York State. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I've just a couple of questions that we had from before here, and just to ask you. So you would recommend, well, this is something we suggest, and we'll see if you would agree with us. So people who don't have a huge amount of time, what we have suggested is that they fly right up to Buffalo. So say Dublin, Newark, Newark, Buffalo. Stay in Buffalo, do a few nights in New York State and come back down that way, because sometimes if you only have a week, you mightn't get to see as much trying to circle it. So would you agree with that? And would you agree that, I mean, you showed Buffalo there. I was really impressed with Buffalo. And what I liked about Buffalo being only 30 minutes from Niagara is that Niagara on the New York side, and I know you're not being biased, is actually much nicer than the Canadian side because that's so built up. So I think I have three things there, but would you agree? Statement that I made?
Yes, yeah, I think it works both ways. If you, like, as you say, if you wanted to tour and then fly back from Buffalo, or as you say, fly up to Buffalo first and then tour back down the States. I definitely think you're right, because otherwise, if people, especially if people haven't been to New York City before, they're going to spend too much time in the city and then not have time to experience the state. And there's so much to see and do. On Buffalo, yes, I think it's the second largest city in New York State, and it was probably my favorite place when I went, obviously aside from Niagara, but I stayed in Buffalo and then went to Niagara for the day trip. And yeah, it has such an amazing feel, the city, really beautiful place to go and visit. And then third question was about Niagara, of course. Yes, so I obviously, as you say, I am biased. But because on the US side, it's a state park, they can't build the high-rise hotels that they do on the Canadian side. So it depends what people are looking for, obviously. But on the US side, as I say, it's a state park. So it's beautiful to walk through and alongside the river before you actually get to the falls. And obviously, you might maybe get a slightly better view from the Canadian side because you can see all three falls. But it's all about the experience, if you ask me, and the experiences are all on the US side.
And to be honest with you, to the untrained eye and ear, when you go to Niagara, it all looks amazing. The cool thing is you could go across, you can be in the US and be in Canada and just be in the US and just, hop across with your passport, which is very cool as well. And the other thing I was going to ask you before I let Paul ask her questions is, if you're in Manhattan, and again, you don't want to drive out of Manhattan, you can hop on the train and go up to, there's a train you can get into Dutchess County. Would I be right in saying that? There's a train, and you could start and hire your car there. Do your few nights in around the Dutchess County, Hudson Valley area, and go from there, rather than driving from Manhattan, because that could be quite daunting for people. Absolutely,
yeah. I think obviously I live in London, and I think driving in New York City is worse than driving in London. So I would definitely recommend the train. So it goes to Poughkeepsie in Dutchess County. So it's only an hour, and then as I say, you hire your car there. It's about a third of the price than it is hiring it in New York City. And as you say, the roads up there are beautiful. So they're all sort of 3-4 lane roads, and there's nowhere near enough cars to fill them. So it's really easy to drive up there.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Okay, I'll stop talking now because I know I've kept you all so late. I'll let Paula do the few questions.
Tommy's just asked, is it any more expensive to holiday in New York State area than the rest of the Northeast area?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think obviously it depends where you're staying, but in terms of the attractions, it's all roughly the same prices. As Della mentioned earlier, it depends which museum you go to, but a couple of the museums I mentioned are free of charge. So I think in terms of attractions, it's roughly the same prices. It obviously just depends if you're staying, what hotel brand you're staying in, or if you're looking for the RV holidays. So I think it just depends. I think the only thing that would differ would be the accommodation.
Neil has a question here, and he's also just made a comment as well, that he's heard that the wide range of restaurants in the Hudson Valley established by chefs trained at the CIA.
Yes, yeah, that's actually a really good point. So thank you for asking. A lot of them do come back. So there's a couple of ways it works. So there's international chefs that come to get trained and then open them locally. But there's also local chefs that get trained, go international, and then come back to bring their cuisine home, if you like. So yeah, Dutchess County especially has some amazing restaurants because of the people trained from the CIA. Yeah.
Excellent. And he's also just asked the ballooning and toboggan track that were in your initial video. He's just asked whereabouts are they? I think the
So the
toboggan, I think, was up. Yeah.
Yeah,
Lake
the
Placid,
toboggan. Toboggan's Lake Placid, so up in the Adirondacks. And then the ballooning, you can actually do a few places, but I think the one in the video is Letchworth State Park. So that's up in the Finger Lakes.
Okay, perfect. And then Kira, I think you have a question there from Carmel.
Yeah, I haven't been doing the questions at all. You've been managing on both ends because I know they're coming in a few different ways. But I clicked on answer live by accident. So, but anyway, I think I know the answer. I can't catch where you said to hire the car from instead of Manhattan. So what we're saying is Poughkeepsie. Poughkeepsie, yeah. Poughkeepsie, yeah. So pick up the car. So stay in Manhattan, do your few nights, Carmel, then take the train from, I presume, Penn Station or wherever up to
Grand Central, yeah.
Or Grand Central, and then pick up in Poughkeepsie. Am I saying that right? Poughkeepsie?
Yeah, it'll do.
It'll do. And pick up, you can get the car hire there. You can you could stay a night or two around the area and then pick up your car, but it just means it's a more relaxed area than driving out of Manhattan and then going all the way. The other idea we had said at the start, Carmel, was to fly into Buffalo and come down and do it that way. So just picking up in a more regional area. But the whole thing is everything is completely tailor-made. So that's fantastic. I think that's all the questions, Paula, is it? We keep talking about it for forever. I'm going to quickly there, Neil is telling me Poughkeepsie. You keep correcting me. I'm going to tell everybody what you told me your party piece was. We had a John Denver situation. Neil is a big John Denver fan. I'm going to get him to sing about John Denver if he's not careful in a second. But he's right, Poughkeepsie. Let me just bring this on to, okay. So we have a couple of example itineraries here that we'll send to people if they want to have a look, or we can tailor make a trip from scratch. So you can see these are all self-drive holidays. Sorry, it skipped ahead there, lads. Self-drive holidays, including flights, accommodation and car hire. And you can see they're for all April and May 2022. So 14 nights New England, $15.99 per person. Captivating Capital Region, 11 nights, $17.89 per person. And then Dutchess County in New York State, $17.69 per person for 11 nights. And these would all be based on kind of in around a 4-star standard, but we can move that down if you want to mix and match, or you want to have something unique. Like New England, we always tend to have, maybe boutique inns and small little guest houses, and we'd have some kind of, cultural stuff in Capital Region. And same with Dutchess County, there'd be unique destinations. But, everything can be tailor-made to suit the budget, the car type, the flights that you want. So, but this will give you an idea of what you'll be looking at for 2022 to get a good holiday. Guided tours. Again, if you were on any of our calls last week, you might remember we had Insight Vacations join us, and they're part of the Travel Corporation, who also own Trafalgar, who we've mentioned down here. And these would be fully escorted. So there'd be loads of highlights included, lots of authentic dining, lots of unique experiences, as well as, luxury coaches, and obviously all your flights and your guide, and full COVID protection as well for, health and safety. So there's a number of trips there for New England and Washington to Philly, Boston and Cape Cod and the islands, and then Washington, DC, Niagara and New York. I won't go through all of them, but we can send them all to you. But just again, to show you an example. Another couple of quick ideas. One that comes up all the time, and I mentioned it to Chris and Tony earlier, Boston and Cape Cod family holiday. This is just such a popular one. I know September 21 is probably a little bit hopeful this year, but just to give you an idea, this is for 10 nights, doing 3 nights in Boston, 7 nights down in Cape Cod, flights, accommodation, car hire, 4 people sharing, $4,399, and it is an amazing holiday, something that you would thoroughly enjoy after being in lockdown. And then we did mention the Four Seasons in Philly, and I know it's just a fabulous hotel, and so is the Kimpton, any of the Kimpton group. So we've the Palomar there. So if you're looking for something at the end of the year, bit of tax-free shopping before Christmas, and you want to treat yourself, you've got the 5-star Four Seasons and you got the 4-star Palomar. You will not go wrong with either of those hotels. So 2 nice treats for the end of the year. And then the last 2 nights, I can't believe we've only 2 nights left. So on our USA evenings, West Coast USA tomorrow night, we've California and Oregon, and then Southern USA on Thursday night. And that will be our 8 nights of our inspirational done. So we've 2 nights left to go. That whole page, that screen was full of information, and I'm deleting it night by night. So there's only 2 nights left. So if you want to join us and you want to register or you aren't registered, just let us know and we'll get you on the list. And all that leaves me to say is to say a massive thank you to all our guests this evening. Della from Capital Region USA, Will from New York State, Julie from Unstoppable Philadelphia, as you can see there, and Tony and Chris coming from New England, and of course Paula as well. We couldn't do this without you guys. I'm really, really grateful you gave up your time. I'm very conscious that it's 9:30, and we did a lot to cover this evening, but I think we did all these places justice. Ye did all these places justice. So so I don't know if anybody has any last words, but just from us, thank you for taking the time. For all the attendees, thank you for taking the time. And hopefully we can look after you on a really exciting holiday in 2022 soon. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Kira. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if our panelists can just stay on for 1 quick minute while we